Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this edition of the Public Safety Drone Review. I am Miriam McNabb, editor at Drone Life. We're going to give people a few minutes or 1 minute, really, just to get into the room, and then we will get started. Thanks for your time.
One of the things you're really going to have to do, guys from NUSTL, is to tell what is new steel.
Yeah,
It's like everybody goes, is that like the word new steel? I'm like, no,
that's all.
of course not. Not for a federal agency.
I wrote it down so we can get started because I am, as I mentioned before, Miriam McNabb, editor at Drone Life. With me, as always, Chief Charles Werner of Drone Responders and Timothy Martin, the director of the regional of UAS training at the Regional Training Center. And our two guests, we are honored to have you with us here. Thank you so much for your time and participating. Our two guests are from NUSTL, which is the National Urban Security Technology Laboratory. We have Jared Oren, Director of Test and Evaluations. It is the NUSTL is a division of DHS Science and Tech. We also have Mitchell Roberts with us. Thank you so much for being here, guys. We really appreciate it.
We're happy to be here, and I'm just looking for our website link to drop that in the chat. There we
All
go.
right. Thank you very much. As always, please do participate in the chat. We have just a couple of housekeeping things. As always, our guests are not paid to be on the show. They don't pay us to be on the show. We only get guests that we think will be interesting to you, our audience. Thank you for that. At the end of this session is being recorded, and after the recording over the next few days, this will be uploaded to the Drone Life YouTube channel. That is Drone Life TV. When you see this logo, you will be in the right place. So it's Drone Life TV if you have to step out early or you want to share it with somebody else. And we will start the session, as always, going over some of the news of the day. I see Charles already loaded it into the chat for you. Please participate, ask questions, comment. We always love to see that. Keep the conversation going. But before we get started with that, Charles, what is happening next week? He's looking at me blankly. This is not good. It's NACOM. It is the
Oh, yes,
national.
yes. We have our Drone Responders National Conference on Public Safety UAS, or NACON for short.
He did
Um,
know that he will be there.
I do plan to be there. Uh, New Steel was going to be there, but now they're not looking like they're going to be there unless DHS has some miraculous change, which I don't see happening. Anyway, yes, national conference next week, the 10th and 11th. We have day one is UAS enabling public safety drone programs, and day two is really focused on counter-UAS detection and all those things that are moving around in the dark now. So tickets are still open. We still have a few tickets left, so don't wait too long because last year we had 100 people on a waiting list, and it has become the biggest conference in the United States, if not the world.
Yeah,
And
and
it is actually a great place to connect with the regulators and federal officials who can be there. So,
yeah, yeah. And Charles, sorry we can't be there with the DHS shutdown current situation. Our travel is extremely limited to mission critical, super urgent things.
You got a lot of other mission critical super things that are going on right now.
and we'll get to those in the second half. Drone Life will be covering it, so read along and we will put as much information as we can as it happens from the floor.
Miriam will be moderating the regulators.
Always my favorite thing. As Charles pointed out, I don't have to know what's going on. I just have to say, what the heck are you guys doing? And lead the conversation.
There you go.
All right, let's get started with some news stories. We just have a few this time. I kind of put them into categories. So the top ones are just departments starting their drone programs or expanding their drone programs, how they're doing it, what they're using. Kansas City, and I actually picked this one up because it was on Axios, which is actually a pretty big news outlet, kind of still getting from outside of our communities. These things still, I guess, sound like big news to people who haven't thought about it before. Kansas City, drone as first responder program deploying drones from rooftop nests. So I think that this is really kind of DFR 2.0 becoming more and more a thing, as Charles has discussed many times, and we've discussed many times on this show. As BVLOS progresses, those waivers become a lot easier to obtain, and hopefully it doesn't get harder after we have the BVLOS rule. But this DFR 2.0 really becomes sort of much more viable. Any thoughts you guys want to add on this? I know the other thing I think to say though is we always have a lot of people who are just starting out on their programs or just investigating their programs, and it bears mentioning every time that you don't have to start out with DFR 2.0. You still get a lot of benefit from just drone in the back of the trunk.
I have an anecdote on that, if you don't mind, Miriam. So
Please.
around 2 years ago, NUSTL has a working group called Big City Fire, and it's 11 or 13, I want to say, Jared, correct me if I'm wrong, of the largest fire departments across the nation. And they do a lot of requirements matrixing for us because they give us really good feedback. And one of the things that they thought would be great is if we published a document that had policies and procedures for them to basically use as templates, because we understand first responders don't always come from an aviation background. And we were surprised to hear, and I'm not going to call out the cities, right? But some of the larger cities out there, their paperwork was pretty anemic as far as policies and procedures go. So we were able to publish that, and it's on our website, and we can potentially put it in the chat. That has something they can copy and paste, change the department name, add in DFR sections, right? With their waiver requirements from the FAA and their actual COA. And then they have something they can go to their council, they can go to their insurance, all these other agencies, or these entities, I should say. And it really buys down the time that they're spending on paperwork and puts them in the technology side where they want to be instead. So I was really surprised to see, because of how much work Drone Responders has done, that we have people like that. This news article, it's March with Kansas City PD using DFR. And you're like, oh, well, I mean, sure, is that really news? But there's a lot of agencies out there that are still standing up their programs.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think we find that all the time, and everybody's welcome here. And absolutely, people who are just starting to get into the process, this is a great place. There are a lot of resources, and it can be totally intimidating because police are and fire are extremely busy serving their communities. They don't have time for another full-time job of paperwork to stand up a program. So,
We're reading 14 CFR.
And I think
yeah.
and I think Tim will agree. Most departments originally started with tactical operations. That's where we kind of cut our teeth. And
Mhm.
then DFR kind of came in and has kind of taken over the landscape in a large degree because of regulatory changes. And a lot of departments now are starting at DFR. Now, one of the things that's a little bit of a problem is that, to your point, Mitchell, is that most of these departments across the country do not have aviation departments. If you look at traditional aviation, there's about 300 in the United States. That's all. Now we have over 8,000 public safety agencies with drone programs. And we now, as I mentioned before the show, we went from 50 DFR approved waivers in 6 years to over 1,000 approved in 6 months and 125 new. And these are really focused on DFR per month because what's happened is they've seen this new advantage of getting eyes on the scene first and letting officers know what they're going into, especially for law enforcement. That's a game changer of knowing what you're walking into that has been reported and what's real. And Tim, I think you would probably agree with that.
Yeah, and what I those as we go into these news stories, this is a perfect example of these news stories are not generated by aggressive reporters. They're generated by the agencies themselves making their program newsworthy. And you're seeing a lot of of buzzwords that are being thrown out, and the difference between this program and other programs is they're talking about the nest concept, which draws the attention of the media because a single drone being deployed from a rooftop, whether it's the old method or the new method, is one thing. But when you start putting a hive with, hive or nest, whatever you want to call it, when you put multiple drones that are capable of essentially going out there and providing a service 24 hours a day, it's pretty big news for that agency. Like you said, Charles, it's never had an aviation program. For example, I just got back from Milwaukee training them. Milwaukee went headfirst into DFR. They've got a nest of several drones on their busiest precinct, and they've been flying missions now for a while. Incredible story of success going from zero aviation program to now having 5 full-time DFR pilots, in addition to every precinct having pilots. But what struck me, what Charles was saying with Milwaukee is they went DFR first. Now, I was out there training their SWAT team members and their other teams on indoor tactical flying because now they're backing it up and they're saying DFR is great. However, we now need to get the drones in the hands of the boots on the ground, and start training them for what really, in my opinion, is one of the best uses of drones, and that's the indoor tactical stuff, protecting lives, not letting people walk into dangerous situations, that type of thing. So yeah, it's these news stories are great. Keep them coming. I will never get tired of seeing news stories in a positive light.
I would just say I had put in drone as a first responder in a Google alert. I've had to take that off of the Google alert
Yeah,
because they're coming in 2, 3, 4 a day.
yeah, yeah. It's good
Right.
stuff.
And it is a lot, and I don't always spend a lot of time talking about these when we do these shows, but honestly, I think it's great to give us an opportunity to discuss and what resources are out there and how are people doing it because um that's the point. And for every large city, for every Kansas City or Milwaukee or LA, Huntington Beach, New York City, whatever, there are 100 small communities that can really benefit from the use of drones and aren't necessarily in the position either because of the finances or the landscape to do a kind of DFR 2.0 scenario. So,
Yeah.
And I got to, oh, go ahead, Jared.
Yeah, I just want to add on the DFR side, this is super interesting. And Mitchell and Tim and Charles are much more well versed on this than I am. But I do want to point out that DFR is also increasingly important on the counter UAS side as well. So our lab is part of the DHS Science and Technology arm, and we're really busy getting ready for the World Cup. And so we're working with 8 of the 11 host cities around the country, and we've been privy to a lot of the conversations where those state and local law enforcement teams are getting initial training, sometimes in a couple different pieces from the FBI folks down in Redstone Arsenal. And recently we sat in on some of that training, and it was around the ground intercept teams get. So I just want to flag that there's a number of use cases for DFR, and be thinking about it also for on the counter UAS side. To that end, we have actually a market survey report that's draft right now. I guess before describing that draft survey report, I should make you guys well aware that we are a federal resource for first responders at the state and local levels. If you didn't already click on that link that we put in the chat. So we produce a lot of materials for first responders to, kind of like consumer reports, market survey reports, and operational field assessments. And these reports are, and assessments are first responders, having a variety of these technology tools in their hands and then providing feedback on those in realistic settings. So the first step for a lot of those reports is doing a market survey and then going to an assessment from there. So stay tuned. We'll have actually a market survey specific to DFR out here and publicly releasable, hopefully soon, after the shutdown, unfortunately.
I want to pull on the beginning of what you said, Jared, how DFR is related both from a Git team perspective, but also I had an interesting conversation before I got on the call here with our lab director and someone from a state aviation agency. DFR sensors for air domain awareness are the same sensors you want to use to actually deploy drones across your county, across your city, right? So you don't have to buy the radar twice. What you have to do is figure out how to connect that data into a centralized database, common operating picture, et cetera. So there's a big opportunity to get wins across law enforcement who may be looking at the counter side and fire who's looking at the law enforcement's looking at the response side too, of course, right? But getting wins across the agencies where previously the missions may not have overlapped as much, but everyone wants to know what's in the air at the same time. And the sensors you're using for DFR to go to FAA and say we can fly here, it's safe, are similar sensors to what you're going to want to use to know what's in the air that may be nefarious.
Right. And as we always say, you're absolutely right, Mitchell. And as we always say, if something goes bad, people call the police. So if you have a nefarious drone over your house or you're afraid, you're going to call the police. They need to be able to respond to that and know what's happening. All right, our next couple of stories are, one is just a really put in there as a reminder if anybody else wants to say anything about it, but it's as a reminder that every time this comes up, people are going to use that horrible word. They're going to talk about surveillance, and it doesn't matter how many times I talk to sworn officers, they do not have time to be flying around just looking for problems. Never met one who did. However, this is going to have to be something that agencies address before they start their programs, that they work with their colleagues and find the resources and get that communication out there early that this is not about surveillance. It's really important to let the community know what you're doing, what you're not doing, so that it doesn't come back to you later. And the third one was really just interesting to me because it's an international story about drone as first responder, where it's in India. And frankly, they're just patrolling public spaces to keep here in Boston, they call it congregate drug use, but to kind of keep those spaces clear. So just kind of it's what every community needs. That's what they're doing. So that was kind of interesting happening in India.
Well, it's interesting, you throw drones into that patrol, that proactive environment, and that's where people freak out. That's where the civil rights groups draw the line, and other countries they're doing it probably with success because it's just a whole literally a whole different world. But the crazy thing is that we've been doing that in the United States for 70 years in manned aviation. Every police department that has a police helicopter, they're not responsive. They're patrol geared. So, I most of my career I had a helicopter over my head, and if they weren't responding to calls, they were proactively looking for crime. They were looking for suspicious people, suspicious vehicles, speeders, and I can't think of a time it was questioned. Drones,
We have mounted police in Boston. Mounted police are in all of the parks
so
doing exactly that. I mean,
yeah.
and people are happy to see them because they're keeping the parks, safe.
So it's going to even out eventually, I think, but we have to be very careful that if it works in India, it's not gonna. It'll work. I mean, it'll be very, very effective here, but
But we're not there
it's not going
yet.
to go over very well.
Right.
So
So
Tim, I was also struck by that in a slightly different way. there's some part of the article that says something like City Police Commissioner Seema Lektar told Times of India that the visible aspect, something blah blah blah. The visible aspect is an active patroller. I sort of laughed when thinking about, is this like the new unmanned speed limit sign that you just put on the side of the road? That is this overt police presence that statistically slows everyone down, statistically slows down activity. I think it probably is.
That,
Absolutely.
that
And that's, I
Well,
mean,
I'll
isn't
give
that
you the
kind of
other
what we
side of it
want?
though. We've got the ACLU, and then I think we have had a little bit of chilling effect from some of the things that have happened in Minneapolis. What we're seeing happen now is that in Virginia, for example, when the first regulations and laws came out in Virginia, they were very limiting to law enforcement, that they couldn't do anything law enforcement wise unless they had a search warrant. So we've been through the past 2 years to try to change that in Virginia. And this last year, we were like right there. All the votes were counted and in until one person said, so wait a minute, you can tell me that a drone can launch from the top of a building and fly to an incident. And on the way, on public land, if a person is seen doing a crime, that can be used against them. And the counsel to the committee said, yes, it's been proven, Fourth Amendment, case law, is that if you're in a legal place where you can be to see what happens, then yes, that can be used. And it got held over till next year.
Hmm.
I mean, we're covered with cameras. We've got city cameras, we've got license plate readers, we've got traffic cameras and ring cameras that are accessible to law enforcement. Everything is already on camera and proactively recording. But you throw the drone element into it, and it
Bad word.
changes
It's a
things.
bad word.
Yeah, it's
I
20 years
tell
in news media
everybody
with
this is
predators, right?
always my response. I go out in my community, somebody wants to get into it or something, and I remember this statistic. It's like, do you have any idea how many cameras are recording you
yeah,
whenever you walk into a Target? And the answer to that is over 60. And it's tied to your credit card information. I mean, really, you know,
yeah.
you've already made that choice. But all right, we digress. We're going to go on to something that I know we are going to have a lot to discuss. So I'm just going to put it out there and let you guys go. We have two stories that kind of go together. This month, the month of February, the airspace in Texas was closed down twice by the FAA. And so the first time it was closed down, apparently now they're saying that it was not actually even a drone, but there was military presence who was utilizing counter-UAS technology against something. Now there's some question about whether or not it was a drone at all, and that caused the FAA to react and say, okay, we need to shut down the airspace if you are using counter-UAS technology. We need to make sure that we don't have planes coming in close by that could be endangered. The second time it was closed, there was an incident where I think there was some concern about a cartel drone coming over the border. There was again counter-UAS technology implemented, and that caused a brief airspace closure. But these closures are somewhat of a surprise to the airspace users when they happen. Um, so I do think I'll put this out there to get the conversation started. I do think that it reveals some gaps in the whole communication and um, process workflow here that's happening, and especially when you have a military base right next to an airport, there can be additional problems. So
How'd you get
that'll
DHS on
be.
the call the week after this happened? I don't know how you convinced us to jump on.
I'll start to give DHS an out.
Hey,
How's that?
Charles, you want to answer that one?
Yeah.
And let me say too that we tell our guests they are on our show as individuals. So this is not, there, don't hold them the entire DHS. We are on our show as individuals. We like them to be able to express their opinions too. So
I always said the drone world in law enforcement especially is the Wild West still, and this is a perfect example of that because up until now, all of our counter drone operations in local law enforcement, especially what we teach, is boots on the ground, pilot interdiction, um, identify where the pilot is and address it that way. It wasn't up until recently that we started getting remote ID identification, which is amazing. And it makes that boots on the ground concept even more effective because now you're seeing exactly where the pilot is, not just where the drone is. So uh, these type of incidences now with the World Cup and the Olympics coming, we're starting to see more technology interdictions, and the outcomes are unpredictable. So I think we could expect a lot more of this based on what they're seeing, what technology is. Before, testing was very specific and very controlled environments. Now we're testing in real world scenarios. I will never forget testing a um, RF jammer product in a stadium, and on the complete other side of the stadium was another drone flying, and pointed at this direction was the jammer. And what happened is the signals bounced off of the metal stadium frame, hit the other drone, and instead of doing what it's supposed to do and have the drone stop or land, that drone went complete wacky and flew full speed over a very busy freeway. And it wasn't until they turned off the device that they were able to get the drone controlled again. So I think the point is that we're dealing with stuff that we've never, at least at the local and even federal level, have dealt with. So much concern now with what are these technologies really capable of doing and not doing, And I'll tell you that the detection systems that are out there right now, like um, drone tag and those ones, they're incredible. And I know that's low, that's bottom of the barrel as far as what's out there technology wise, but just drone tag alone, um, we're getting a 6 mile range in Orange County here of every drone flying in the county, and the data we're getting, the nefarious flights that we're seeing is just incredible. The big difference, and this goes to your story, one of your stories you posted, we have no idea which drone is law enforcement, FBI, DEA. I mean, I could tell. I could look at it, and no one flies 30 M30s or even the M14. Anything with a thermal camera is generally not going to be a part of the public. It's going to be, but when you have a drone that's not identifiable and it turns out it's friendly fire, if you will, where we're taking down friendly drones, I think that's where the big gap we're missing right now in these technology companies is we have to be able to whitelist our friendly drones, and hopefully you guys at DHS, that's one of your projects you're working on there to try to get these companies to make that standard because
Yeah.
that's going to become the biggest problem.
Before you all go into that, I just want to hit on a couple things. I know you guys are going to hit in this big time, as this is what you guys are all right into now. Is that with the Safer Skies, they gave now the authorities. The the good news is they have the authorities. The better news is you just can't go and do it yet. You have to have the requirements and the training to be able to go forward, and that's really critical. But if we go back and look at the New Jersey situation, everything in the sky became a nail, and now we had to hit every one of them with a hammer and deal with it. And most of them were not drones. So from that part, I am concerned going forward, and even before all the mitigation stuff goes forward, with the exception of the host cities, the Olympics, the NCR, and some other places, America 250, you have to have the training first. And what was I going to do with that?
And
I think the whole thing is there's got to be a
the The
There is
equipment
no
is worth
silver
it.
bullet, and so there's got to be a layered approach in detection and all that kind of stuff. But Tim, just wanted to add to what you said. They're now at our conference. The FAA is going to come and tell about the new Discover tool that gives law enforcement access to the drone registry. So now you will get a bigger and deeper look. Now the problem is not everybody's registered their drones, and the bad guys usually haven't registered their drones. But I had prompted S&T and said, not S&T, the new office, the U.S. CUAS office under Steve Willoughby. I'd said, why don't we look at taking that registry and going through and whitelisting all the law enforcement drones? So we know they're law enforcement. So then if you all have a drone that pops up that you're dealing with and you can detect it and it's us, you know not to shoot us down. Because that's the other big concern. We had a call in Texas TexCon asking some of the federal agencies, so if you shoot us down, what happens? Are you guys going to recoup us? And they went, we'll talk to you about it. To me, that means there is no definitive answer to that. And I'll just stop. But I think we have to go forward and take this very carefully, very methodically. I think that what they've learned in Texas is something we can learn from is, okay, how do we communicate better? How do we identify who's in the airspace? And what are the really tight procedures? Because I know in the host cities, one of the first questions that came up in one of your all's meetings, I think, that you're going to talk about is the question is, are we going to be able to use jamming? And I think Mary Rupert was on and she said, no, you're not, because jamming can do so many other things in the immediate area. And I'll stop with that.
Yeah, so I want to. There's a few things that I want to disentangle, and I want to do so carefully. So it may seem like I'm covering some baselines that don't directly address the article, the couple articles, but there's actually a few different key points to make it through all this. So I want to start from the fact that absolutely our authorities are rapidly evolving, and this is a major sea change. That's a major win. Thank you to the Safer Skies Act, and actually also the administrative change through the FEMA Counter-UAS grant, which came out in October, and many folks on this call are well aware of the details there because they're one of the 11 host cities for the World Cup, and they're beneficiaries of the $250 million that went out. Um, the two articles are describing, however, federal potential deconfliction or federal safety type questions, other coordination between federal entities and Department of War, activities that may be on a base versus maybe on the border, and the extent of coordination with FAA and things like that. So I want to disentangle that with the audience because there are a certain set of rules and prerequisites for the state and local law enforcement that to make use of that $250 million, and I'll start there. And most folks are aware of this. We describe this in a biweekly working group, Counter-UAS, state and local law enforcement, Counter-UAS equipment placement and planning working group. So we cover this in a lot more detail there. But, folks have to go to this Redstone Arsenal, Alabama training be trained up on this type of equipment that FBI makes them aware of and has practical, 2 week type in classroom and field exercises with. And they actually cover a lot of the details that I don't want us to conflate. So they cover the different flavors, if you will, of mitigation equipment and how that differs from the different flavors of the tech track and ID. We could spend an hour there if we're not careful. So I'll just say that you guys were talking a little bit about different types of mitigation equipment just now, but they vary dramatically. And actually, the state and local law enforcement who have received 250 million part of the $250 million. They're only authorized to purchase and then use equipment that is a subset of those mitigation equipment. So it actually doesn't include directed energy and other forms of kinetic, lasers, attack drones, ballistics, actually also GNSS mitigation. None of that is authorized as part of the training, specifically for state and local law enforcement. So I say all that to say that hopefully you're now starting to hear that there are some safeguards in place so that folks aren't buying a bunch of equipment that is just a free for all. And using it in around populated areas and so on and so forth. There actually are rules. This isn't Vietnam.
Well,
So
there's a
uh,
lot that can be done. Technology is great, right? We get people approach our lab all the time asking, like, how can I take this drone out of the sky? And I'm sure there's folks on this call, their local sheriff or whoever it is, like, well, I'll just shoot it. Like, we all know at this point, like, that's not the right strategy. But there's a lot you can do before you actually have the equipment. I know we want the toy. I know we want to jam it. I know we want to like see it captured with a net and find the perpetrator if they're doing something bad, right? But what we found is the ground level work to develop ConOps, understand collateral, where you're going to place assets, how you're going to harden assets. That's step one right now. And it's kind of frustrating because the end cuts, you can only get so many people in on classes, right? And they're prioritizing FIFA World Cup cities. So I empathize with them, and we just have to be patient to be able to roll it out larger. And to Charles' point earlier, it's kind of nice that it's not fully out there yet because we're going to start to learn where the weaknesses are and iterate on them and make it better and get better equipment. And our lab's going to be a part of validating that equipment, I believe, and making sure that it's actually effective, working with the other federal partners, right? But it goes back to the news article. Interoperability coordination, sharing sensor data, and then ground level ConOps and TTPs, like that has not changed. I think in your day-to-day job, if you're a first responder, like those are important, and it's no less important here. And once you get those in place and you have, all your points of contact, like who's my airport person, who's my FSDO rep with my FAA LEAP agent, right? Who is my power utility, who is whatever, the sky's the limit. Pun. Uh, get those points of contacts down, have tabletop exercises, learn who you need to talk to. And then once you have that in place, then that's all handled. That baseline is there. You get mitigation technologies and you can say, okay, now we have a jammer that's capable of doing X, Y, or Z. We have technology, folks on our team that have an understanding of the physics of that.
yep.
Then you can start having conversations of, you know what, in our local town, we're concerned about this because everyone's ConOps are different. We talked to DOW, we talked to FBI, like a SEER event with a Super Bowl, just a Super Bowl event, I should say, completely different than if you're in Montana somewhere trying to protect a prison. Totally different. And a lot of that derivation of what's important to you is going to have to come from the end customer. And when you have that baseline, you have your stakeholders in the room, you can really make those requirements much more impactful for you.
Yeah, and to tie that into the World Cup planning at the publicly releasable way, right? The way that we have assembled a working group city by city, and we've got everyone in the room, and tying this also into Hunter Hegel's question, how do being concerned about mitigating friendly UAS compared to actual threats? Absolutely, you have to use those working groups and use those white lists, use other camera operating pictures that you're assembling that includes Blue Force tracker type information, also of personnel, and has all these redundant communications, redundancy in GIS map awareness tools, TAC and otherwise. So you absolutely need an approach that is specific to the event, to the location, to the type of thing that you are attempting to protect, and of course connecting that to your counter-UAS authorities, which are often specific, and you have specific legal authorities for making use of counter-UAS that we don't have time to get into here, except to say that it is absolutely a evolving landscape, and the Safer Skies Act has opened the aperture on the federal side, not just the state and local side, for how and when we can make use of the counter-UAS authorities that we have. Um,
To the
uh,
chat, just while we're on this topic, do you want to take that, Jared?
Say again.
The chat was asking about assets that we have in place if we're working the World Cup at all 11 cities, and I think that it's all public information that DHS is heavily involved in securing those events.
Yeah, so I alluded to the fact that we have a working group for each of the city. So DHS is in charge of a subset of cities around the country and having a federal counter-UAS team lead. And actually our NUSTL team is in charge of doing a lot of the coordination and planning and sensor placement, sort of optimization, if you will. So yeah, we're working on that very heavily. It's a very complicated activity to plan for each city, and each city has a number of unique features. Yep.
I think
Um, I-
to your point earlier, I just wanted to hit on this is that the skies are getting more congested, more complicated. So forget about counter UAS for a minute, just the detection and the coordination of what's going on. As we're starting to see overlap DFR programs, we're starting to see tactical operations that operate inner space of DFR programs, and we're starting to see when we have wildfires and drones and first responder programs and how do they coordinate and interact. So it really gets down to we've got to do a lot more coordination and know what's out there to go forward. And you guys, and I think there is supposed to be some additional rulemaking that's supposed to be forthcoming in the counter UAS piece as part of the Safer Skies Act.
So I just want to, we have a lot of things in the comments, basically asking, are we going to be ready here? Hi, Jim. Jim works for Drone Life, and he's actually doing a series on counter UAS. Also, because we have 20 minutes left, I want to make sure that we dive in really to NUSTL and what you guys are doing. So we've been talking a lot about this aspect of kind of coordination, right, between federal agencies, and this is one of the most complex things about the counter UAS landscape is this coordination. So I know that NUSTL is doing a lot of work to, bring more voices to the table. You want to talk about how that's working right now, kind of through
yeah,
this effort?
Absolutely. And Mitchell, feel free to chime in here. So, and I'll tie it to Jim McGill's question, are all 11 states hosting World Cup events going to have counter UAS capabilities in place and people trained in time? The answer is absolutely. What that picture looks like, city by city, it varies quite a bit. Um, we'll state that you have DHS components who are the federal lead to provide the overall counter-UAS capability city by city. And that's so we have a mix of planning of sensors and personnel on the DHS side, and it could be CBP for one city, could be Coast Guard for another, could be Federal Protective Service for another. And so that's a DHS component piece. Some cities are FBI as the federal lead, actually. And so then you bring in on top of or in addition to the federal assets and the associated planning and the personnel there, state and local law enforcement equipment, but actually also stadium equipment. Detect, track, ID only is an important piece of this puzzle when you're thinking about defense in depth, right, and redundancy and resiliency. So we have a mix of equipment by different owners, city by city, for stadium protection, for the fan zones, for in some cases the other areas of interest. And so absolutely, we're planning's well underway. We've been to a number of host cities already. We've been to one city twice already. And it's going great thanks to people like Mitchell who are doing kind of like all the hard work on the ground at a number of these cities, but also thanks to our FBI partners again for the subset of cities that they're protecting.
I just want to take time to say, look, I've been working with some of the host cities and I've been talking to them. And when we first got into this whole thing, they're looking at stuff. We had this event at George Mason University where we brought a 387 law enforcement from across the country with vendors, and they were like drinking from a fire hose. I'm sorry, but when you don't know what you're getting into and you're looking at this technology, you fall victim to the best salesperson, whether it works or it doesn't work. And I just wanted to really put a plug in here to say that you all at New Steel have been doing a great job of really starting to peel that onion and get down to the nitty gritty and helping these people understand what are you looking for, what kind of combination of solutions are necessary, and what do you do to properly deploy these in such a way that it makes sense. And I just want to add one more thing because I had somebody buzz me yesterday and say, "Hey, listen, is anybody talking to the locals about their radio systems and communications when they're putting this counter-UAS stuff in?" And I said, I believe that's all part of the conversations that they're having. But from the communication side is, if you know this is going on, make sure you're touching base with your law enforcement or the people that are coordinating this, just so that you're making sure that it's not messing up your microwave or your radar or your communications transmitters. So I just wanted to say a big shout out to you all for all the work that you've been doing, and thank you for stepping up.
I'll
Yeah,
make
no,
And
it's
no,
I'll
go
make just two
ahead.
points really quick if you don't mind.
Of
One
course.
is, I don't know if it was hit on, but I always try to duplicate it. New Steel is federally funded, completely unbiased SMEs, engineers, etc., that provide advice to first responders at no cost to them. So there's no vendor inputting information in our ears. We are here to give you our opinion based on the laws of physics and what we've tested. And that's the second thing, to add to Jared's point on our support for state and locals, because we have access to our DHS reports, our test and evaluation. We also have access to Department of War, and some other agencies as well. We're providing a package with advisory materials, an advisory package. And if you're on the call and you need that, let us know. And that includes like performance characterization of sensors, right? Maybe you don't need something that's $750,000 with 10 kilometers of range. Maybe you're okay with 2 kilometers, right? So we can help you tool what you're actually needing for your use case. And a lot of the money has gone out already, but still, like that's another important piece of what we do. We eat, sleep, and breathe test and evaluation. How does this equipment work, and how does it work on a performance side as well as a usability side? And Jared can probably pull on that further if we have time. But that's a really big piece I want to hit on of what we provide.
Before Jared goes on, there is another $250 million coming in the next year in 2027. So all of this stuff is really great learning lessons to put the package together to help people the next time so that they're not trying to figure it out on their own. And you guys will have much more guidance going forward. So again, hats off to you guys.
I was actually going to touch on that because I was thinking, when you look at sort of how new technology evolves, right? There were 60 years between the time we had the first cars on the road and the time we had the first DMV, like with the paperwork and the systems and the licensing and the registration and everything. And so something like the FIFA World Cup is kind of, whoa, totally speed up that process. Let's just so how is what you're learning in this process, because you have this major event coming up, going to inform how you roll out afterwards, or how you help agencies afterwards sort of just make this a regular part of their operations?
Yeah, we've been thinking about that a lot actually. The There's going to have to be a few pieces to the puzzle to be successful there, but you're absolutely right. It's got to be iterative. It's got to be lessons learned based and moving forward. So we're hoping that drone responders is actually a huge piece of that as we move forward. We need to hear the unfiltered feedback from you guys. We need to hear we need you guys to play the bad guy, right? And say this agency, this piece, this bureaucracy, this lack of authority is like a huge problem for X, Y, and Z reasons. We've used that in a number of situations so far to cause change, right? So drone responders is hugely important to us for that reason. I want to talk about working group, which is this also standing thing that we want to think about this iterative process. So I already mentioned it. We have a by invite only. The 11 World Cup host cities, are all meeting with us every 2 weeks, and we're saying, what content do you want, us to cover? So some days we're covering, uh, uh, common operating picture or systems and sensor integration challenges, and a few different tools that we have that we're going to be using, that we're already planning for each host city to have, so we can have a common operating picture across, the federal and the state and local and the stadium owner assets and stuff. So the question is, these existing tools, we need feedback on them. Some of this initial teach and train and make you aware of how we normally do things, prior to using state and local law enforcement. Now we need some feedback on, okay, how do we work together on the next thing that we need as a guidance, as an advisory service, as some kind of tool. So we put a couple tools out there. Charles has hung one or two on his website recently. We need feedback on those tools so we can make them better. And we need you guys to point out the things that can help you at scale. We're working with 11 host cities right now, but there's a lot of agencies out there, and they all want to get in the UAS and counter-UAS game. And the authorities are soon allowing for that once you go to the FBI training. So, how do we scalably work on this together? Those are two major first pieces that I'm thinking about. I don't know if Mitchell's thinking of anything else.
You go on. I think that the other part is once we get past the World Cup, it's reasonable to think that you all will then expand out the working group to a larger group of people that will be coming in the next wave of things to be able to share. And then Mitchell.
Exactly. So we will absolutely open this up, this working group, let's say by August, and say, okay, who else needs help? You can come to us for individual consultation, and we'll make you aware of the tools that we have, but then also have custom conversations with you all. But then when we're talking about that many number of agencies, we also got to think smarter about, okay, what are the scalable ways that we can help? Certainly, we'll be in the background reviewing all your proposals come this next September, October for this next round of $250 million. So please do your homework between now and October on potential types of systems and approaches that you want. We were already working with a number of non World Cup host cities so they can start their homework now. So you got 6 months. That's not a lot of time to do your homework to have a smart proposal in. And this next $250 million is going to be more competitive because guess what? It's opened up to everyone now.
Mhm.
How do you see, we only have about 9 minutes left here in the session. There's so much to talk about. Everybody's got a ton of questions, but how do you see the technology evolving? Do you think that what we're working with now is going to be what we're working with next year, 2 years from now?
I'd love to take that, Jared. I geek out on this stuff, so I could talk your ears off on it. The interesting part is the
Please.
technology. I alluded to it earlier. It's all physics based. You're only going to detect radio frequency waves at a certain sensitivity based on what the silicon receiver can do, antennas, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So as far as some of those physics-based constraints changing, not necessarily. And what we're seeing happen with the more mature parts of DOW in particular, is they are the entire threat chain from detection to tracking to identification to mitigation, they're buying that down. So they're compressing the time. They're increasing the performance by either layering systems or adding multiple mitigators, for example. And they're trying to understand how to automate that, which is kind of a scary word. I get it. I mean, especially if you're FAA and you're talking about automation. But truly, if you want long-term solutions to this threat based on what we're seeing in the Russo-Ukrainian war, and I'm going to speak in all open source intelligence here for this conversation, just what I can find online. That's what you need. You need to be able to buy down that decision-making time. You need to have more automation for effectors and things like that. So that's where I see technology going. Better vertical integration, better user interface options where now you have someone from your local PD, or maybe like honestly, you might have people at a fusion center that are operating a regional Counter-UAS system, right? I think that's where technology is going. I don't know that radars or cameras. I mean, we have cameras that are like 8K in your phone now. I mean, if you have a 32K camera, is that really going to make too much of a difference at this point? I don't know. But as far as like detection, radar, like RF detection, radars, cameras, I don't know that that's going to improve as much from a sensor standpoint. But from a whole of integration approach, I think that's where we're going to see a lot of improvements.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by that because, like you said, the technology may not change, but AI is what's going to change. And if you can take a detection system and have it sort out the drones that it's detecting, it can have a whole algorithm of threats. This drone has never been seen in this area. This drone, last time it flew was in a different state or a different country. This drone flies in the park every day. It's a recreational drone. I mean, I think you could sort out strange behavior, like the pilot is here, but the drone is launching from here. You can get AI to get all these suspicious flights. Because if you rely on humans to do it, it's going to be hard to detect that because you're just seeing things on the screen. Whereas AI could tell you that, yeah, this is a suspicious flight based on this data, and it's immediately going to pop up on the screen. So yeah, that's really fascinating stuff to 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 your point of technology is not necessarily how we detect those radio waves isn't going to change. It's how we receive that data and what we do with it.
See, Abby
I
Right.
raised her hand. I've just turned her on so she can talk when you want to let it go, Miriam.
Go for it.
You can
Abby,
talk,
do we
Abby.
have you?
Abby
You
Huber
are
is from our
muted.
lab, by the way.
Okay.
If you unmute, you can talk unless you can't unmute. And if you
well,
can't
while
unmute,
we're
then you'll
waiting,
have to
I'll just
type it.
add. I agree with the autonomy and the integration pieces are the fastest portions of technology space that are moving that can provide dramatic changes in the counter UAS space. I think there will be some surprising other areas that are sensor specific, and I'll leave it there because it's actually hard to. I can speculate in a few different areas with EOIR cameras, with LiDAR, with passive radars, but it's just speculation. I think we will be surprised with some major changes at the sensor level. But I agree with autonomy and integration, major changes, allowing for cheaper at scale solutions.
And critical in terms of time, right? I mean, the drones don't move in slow motion, right? So
Yep.
so the more you can automate, the faster you can address things. Yeah. Absolutely
And
fascinating.
Abby, if you have something to say, you'll have to type it in the chat if you can't unmute because obviously it's not unmuting. I also wanted to say to your point, Tim, is the artificial intelligence also is going to really help with multiple sensing and understanding what that is. It's like somebody said, well, I've got optical and I've got RF and I've got radar and I've got all this stuff. With all these things go off and I've got 10 sensors going off, what the hell does that mean? I don't want to be
Right.
I'll end up chasing my tail unless there's some way of integrating it all into making it some kind of meaningful system.
And
Right.
it's we're the you look at the makeup of drones in the US right now, and you've probably got a large percentage of DJI or Autel or other drones that do not have remote ID capability because they were manufactured before that deadline. And then you have the drones that do have remote ID capabilities. And then you have the large number that aren't required to have remote ID capabilities because they subverted the laws of weight requirements below 249 grams. So the need for those RF signal detection system versus remote ID are going to just grow because most cities don't have that. It's usually at the federal level, but now with the grants and everyone buying this stuff, it's going to change that landscape quite a bit, which is good.
I have a question for you. Obviously, there's lots of things out there, but there are some priorities. Like we know we got issues in prisons and we've got issues at airports and some other stuff. Is there anything being done to kind of create a template for these ones that are more common areas that we really need to take care of because we know we've got existing problems? Almost every prison in the United States is having issues with contraband.
That's
I think that's a
new
good FBI question. Um, yeah.
for the expanded authorities, though. Just want to point that out, right? It's SLTT plus C, right? In the Safer Skies Act.
It is absolutely. So I think we're going to see some official implementation guidance from from DOJ. FBI is just a piece of that, right? And don't quote me on their expected time frame, but late this spring, May, June, whatever. In that implementation guidance, one would assume that's going to help both on the SLTT side and then also the C side. Yep, Bureau of Prisons. There's a lot there. And I think in our working group, but in other areas, we absolutely should be thinking about tools that would be useful, irrespective of that specific user.
Okay. So I guess we lost Abby here. Sorry about that. I apologize. That is probably our user error, Abby. It is 4 o'clock. It's the top of the hour. We could probably go on for another hour, but I want to thank you, Jared and Mitchell. We really appreciate your expertise. This has been great. Really, such good information for the whole community on counter UAS. Good luck. This is, I know, a very tough deadline for you guys. This is kind of a thing. Glad you get to geek out on it. And I think that everyone in the public safety community is actually going to benefit from this work down the road. So
Just knowing that you guys exist, which I think the majority of people probably didn't know. So that's what I love is that,
That's our
you
challenge.
know, get it out
great.
there.
My goal is to make NUSTL a word known in the home, every home.
So, hey, Charles, I was unable to message everyone. So, New Steel are we're open for business for questions for targeted advice, state and locals. NUSTL at hq.dhs.gov. I couldn't put that in the chat, but someone could put that there.
Fantastic. Again, that's National Urban Security Technology Laboratory, part of the DHS Science and Technology Department. So again, thank you so much. If you had to step out or you missed part of it or you came in late, please, you can always see the recording on the Drone Life TV YouTube channel. We will see you next month, and hopefully we will see you next week at the National Conference in Busch Gardens, Williamsburg, Virginia. Take care,
Guys,
everyone.
thank
Thank
you
you.
for the team at NUSTL for bringing order to chaos. Thanks.
Do what we can. And we'll
Big
see you next
job.
week there, Chief, right? We're going to make sure you'll be at NACON.
Yes.
Fingers crossed. I've called the White House and said, come on, just go ahead and declare emergency, reopen DHS, and tell them we're doing it anyway. It's an emergency. NACON is coming up. That's an emergency.
Wow. Putting Busch Gardens in our travel justification right now doesn't sound likely.
It's great.
Yeah, I got to figure out how to get it to be a national security event. Okay, I'll work on that. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Take
Take
care.
care.